This is a review of the Biology Statistics 1 Experimental Design Worksheet for AP Bio. And this is your host, Mr. Grodsky. What I'm going to do is I'm going to model for you how to do the first problem, and hopefully you can go on from there and check the key online. So let's get started. We're dealing with statistics and we're dealing with information, notably quantitative information that we get from experiments. That's how we actually go forward in science. We learn from actual studies that set up a design so that they can see if in fact one variable is affecting another. Hard to do, and as I talked about, you can never truly, completely get a yes or no kind of answer from these experiments. All we can do is say, okay, the data is suggesting the hypothesis was incorrect, or it's suggesting it might be correct. We can never say definitely with any of these experimental designs, no matter how good they are. But the better the experimental design, the more confidence we can have in that the information we're getting is leading us to a certain place. Sometimes that place is good in the sense, well, always the place is good because it can take you to a place where, hey, the hypothesis was supported, we were right. But it also could take you to a place where the hypothesis is not supported, and that also could be a good place because it'll tell us maybe we should look elsewhere for our answers. Okay, so in any case, we're looking at the first part of this, and I want you to make sure that you answer the questions in this format. If you follow the format that I'm giving you in these examples, it's a good way to clearly understand what you have to do and organize your thoughts. As you get better at writing titles and hypothesis and everything else in this part, I'll give you a little more latitude, but right now stick to the way to do this. Okay, so in any case, we're going to give a title to an experiment. And essentially what I'm going to do here is take the effect of the independent variable on the dependent variable. So in the case that I gave you in class today, we had some ducks. And I'm not really good at drawing ducks. I'm not sure if that's a sheep or a dog, but we got a duck. I guess you have big feet, maybe some feathers. I'm not really sure what that is, but what I did tell you was that Mr. Grodsky, smells so bad, that when he walked by a lot of ducks, I guess, 25 of them became paralyzed for a few minutes. So the smell or the odor, for Mr. Grodsky affected the ducks. I guess I didn't draw any wings here either. Now we're getting there. All right, so in the example I gave you in class, we would say the odor was doing something to the ducks. And if you understand that, analogy, we would say the ducks, what they do because they're dependent upon this variable, this is the dependent variable. And we would say that the odor is the independent variable. It's causing the effect. It's being, we say, modified in our study to understand if odor actually, for me, is causing the ducks to become partially paralyzed when I walk past them. Man, I must really smell. All right, I'm going to modify my independent variable. How am I going to do so? Well, I may have Mr. Grodsky nice and clean and walk past the ducks. I may have Mr. Grodsky get really, really, really dirty and sweaty and walk past the ducks. What I'm doing is I'm modifying and changing the independent variable and seeing if the duck's behavior, who's dependent upon the odor, is changing to see if in fact the hypothesis is true. For instance, the title of my experiment would be the effect of Mr. Grodsky's odor, Mr. G's odor, on duck paralysis or duck behavior. But the bottom line, the effect of the independent variable on the behavior of the ducks. The independent. Now how do I test that? Well, I'm going to change and I'm going to modify the odor. I'm going to try to get Mr. Grodsky lathered up and really sweaty, or clean him up, have him have deodorant, okay? Or I can keep them with the same smelliness and have them go closer or farther away. Different ways to do this, okay? But I'm going to modify. I could modify it by distance. I could modify by cleaning them up. Any case, my hypothesis, using the basic format here, if the odor is modified this way, meaning, let's say we do distance. If Mr. Grodzki odor, or the we could say, if the independent variable, which is the odor, is modified in a certain way, then this will happen to the dependent variable. So we could say, if the distance between the odor, or the distance between Mr. Grodzki and the ducks is increased, then the ducks will what? Have less paralysis or less negative behavior. Okay, you could do it that way. So you could also say, if we're going to do the amount of odor, if the odor is increased, then the ducks will be paralyzed more. Okay, I know this is a silly analysis, but that's my hypothesis. Notice the wording. Pay close attention. If the independent variable is changed, and how we're going to change it. Well, in my study, it could be the distance between Mr. Grodzki and the ducks, or it could be how much sweat he has. So if we could say, if Mr. Grodzki has a large amount of sweat, then the ducks will be more paralyzed. Okay, so you can see how I'm doing this, and I want you to use that basic format. Okay, if the independent is changed, then this will happen. We don't know if that's true. We're hoping that we can get some insight whether it's true. We're not going to find out if it's definitely true here, but we're going to try to be able to look at these scenarios and see if we can understand a good design, a better design, and look at investigations with an understanding of these terms. Okay, so the independent variable, the variable that's causing the change, would be what? That'd be the odor for Mr. Grodzki. Okay, or the amount of sweat, we will just stay with the odor. Modifications for me would be the distance, if we're going to go that route, from myself to the ducks, or how much sweat I have. And again, sweat could be how dirty I am, okay, the dirty Mr. Grodzki, or how much odor I would have, okay. Dependent variable, well, what's being acted upon is the duck behavior, okay, duck behavior. And of course, what are the constants? Now, why is that important? It's important because the constants really help us eliminate the other variables that get in the way of understanding. If I'm going to see if my odor affects the duck's behavior, I better not be testing it in let's say, inside a barn and then outside. I better use the same locations. If I'm using the amount of sweat equaling odor, then make sure that I'm at the same distance to the ducks. Okay, I shouldn't have the windows open and not have the windows open. The conditions must be the same temperature. Maybe ducks act crazier at certain times, so same time of day, same foods for the ducks. Okay, so you have to keep a lot of variables the same, so that what? So that we can eliminate the other parts of the puzzle here that may be affecting ducks' behavior. We want to see, we can't eliminate them all, it's impossible, but a good experimental design will eliminate as many as possible so that we can maybe say, okay, there might be something here, and that's what we're after. And say that with confidence if we design something very well. Now, the control is very important because let's say, in fact, I do distance as my modification. Okay, the closer I am to ducks, the more they act, get more paralyzed. And of course, I'm not hurting any ducks here for those animal lovers. This is just a crazy analogy. However, control. Okay, so let's say the closer I get, the crazy the ducks get. Okay, where's my control? How do I know how crazy? Don't I have to have a baseline? Okay, so if I'm going to do distance, I've got to find a baseline. So maybe I do a control by measuring a distance out. Okay, so if I have, let's see how much they act crazy without me. Okay, so let's say I'm not anywhere in your vicinity. Let's look at the behavior. Maybe these ducks have some kind of neurological problem where they just fall over and act paralyzed. You don't know, right? So Good control would be maybe not have Mr. Grodsky anywhere near the ducks and look at their behavior before you do the study. Okay, we could be doing all this for nothing if these ducks have some serious mental health issues. And again, I'm not suggesting that ducks do, for those ducks lovers. Okay, duck, duck, goose. Sorry. Any case, the point being, so we need to see a baseline. We have to, a placebo maybe, just to make sure that any behavior by my dependent variable, the duck behavior, is due to me, okay, and something to compare it to. Very important. Now, controls don't always have to be nulls, meaning nothing of the other variable. There's different types of controls, okay, but you have to have some way to look at this and see how much I'm affecting the duck's behavior and what would be the zero value, okay? Any case, let's do the first one and model that. Okay, scenario 1, compost and bean plants. Who doesn't talk about this? Okay, so we got John's biology class. He investigated the effects of various recycled products on plant growth. John's lab group compared the effect of different aged grass compost on bean plants. Basically what he has here is rotting grass. And the older the rotting grass, because decomposition is necessary for the release of nutrients, right? Decomposition is breaking down. The group hypothesized that the older grass compost would produce taller bean plants because it's got more nutrients. That's what their thinking is. All right. So they want to see, I've got rotten grass, and I want to see if the rotten grass has been composting and decomposing longer, which means there's more nutrients. That would equal a more robust growth in the bean plants. Now, how do we measure the bean plants? Well, in my study above, what we did was probably measured how many ducks acted or fell over when I walked by them. In the case of the bean plants, we're going to measure their height as growth. Okay, so that's important. So let's start with independent variable and dependent variable. That's probably the first thing you should do before you even get to anything. So what is doing the action? Okay, and you could say the compost is. So clearly the independent variable, the one that is causing the change, it's not, okay, is the compost, right? You think about it. The compost and how old it is going to affect plant growth. Plant growth is not going to affect the age of the compost, right? That's the way to think about it. The opposite is silly, right? The number of ducks that fall over and be paralyzed is not, okay, independent of my smell, right? My smell makes the ducks fall over, okay? The ducks falling over do not make me smell bad, like, unless I'm rubbing on them. I don't know. In any case, so compost is responsible, the age of the compost is responsible for what? It's for the height of the beans, right? The height of the bean plants, all right, that's the dependent variable. So the height of the beans don't make the compost older, all right? So it's the other way around. The compost and how old it is going to affect, when it's used as a fertilizer, the bean plants, okay? So what's the title? Well, the way that we write the title is from the first part, it's the effect of the independent variable on the dependent variable. So we would say just using, and please do so right now. I know maybe in class I jumped the gun a little bit and said you can write many different ways to write a title, but please follow this basic format right now. The effect, because we want the title to tell you what this is about. And if you can put the independent variable and the dependent variable in your title, it's a clear understanding what's going on. Let the title start telling you right away what's going on, as opposed to guessing. So the effect of what? What's the independent variable? The effect of the age of the compost. Right? On bean plant height. Simple. Independent variable, dependent variable. The compost is going to do what? Force the bean plant, if in fact there is an effect, to change. All right? What's the hypothesis? Okay, stay within the format that I gave you. Okay, the format is if the an independent variable is modified a certain way, then this will happen. So if what's the independent variable? The compost. That's the one hopefully causing the action. All right, is modified which way, right? Look at the top here. It says what? If the independent variable is modified this way. Well, what's the modification? Let's put that down. Modification is the age of the compost. All right, so if the compost, all right, is older, probably say if the compost is been composting a longer time, but is older, the beans will grow taller. Okay. What do we got next? Constants. What are the constants? Remember, we need to have something constant. If there's no constants in your study, then bad study. I'll never be able to see if one thing has an effect on the other if there's other things sitting out there that are different, right? There's a potential that the other things that are not the same could be having effects. So in this case, I look in the study, the plants receive the same amount of sunlight and water. Well, that's good. So what's constant is the sunlight, because if you had different amounts of sunlight, clearly bean height plant will be affected by that. Okay? And of course, if you're lacking water in one sample from another, okay, the height of the plant would definitely be diminished. So we're going to give them the same amount of sunlight and water. Now, my question in this study would be, what kind of light? How close is the light? Okay? Because sometimes plants will get taller looking for the light. So if the lack is, if the light is could be the same, but where the distance of where the light is could make the plants grow a little elongated, looking for light. But in any case, sunlight. And what's the control here? Okay, how do I know if I'm eliminating sunlight and water differences by keeping them constant so I can look at these two variables? Okay, again, tough to completely take out all the variables. We're doing our best because there's going to be other variables. Notice, didn't mention temperature. What if the temperature of the room or the temperature of one sample is higher than another? That'll affect plant growth. Absolutely. At least we think it will. So that wasn't talked about either. But these are things you're going to have to list and think about. So the last thing here is, what's the control? How do I know, okay, that bean plants grew taller or were affected by the age of the compost? Well, why don't we do what? Have some plants grown without any compost so that I know what their height will be, comparatively speaking. That's the baseline. That's what they would have been without any what? Fertilizer. And then, of course, we have some with fertilizer, and then we compare the ones that potentially are what? Older, and seeing if our hypothesis means the older the compost, the more rich it is in nutrients, thus the greater the growth. That's what we're really after here. So clearly, our control is in flat C. That's our baseline. So when we look at our results, we know that really we're comparing that to no fertilizer. Because if you don't have a control, how do I know how much a change is occurring? We can say maybe the change of height is right there. Any case, if you don't like my bean plants, beat it. All right. Any case, that's me going over the first page. All right. Really try to stick to this framework so you think about independent variable, dependent variable. All right, try to stick to this framework. I did so with the key. Your job now is to finish scenario 2 and 3 and see how it compares to my key. Certainly, there could be some differences, but please stick to the rubric here in the beginning, okay, as you learn how to do this. Hope that helped.